welcome back to my channel, or if this is the first video that you're seeing, then welcome to my channel. And as you can tell from the title of this video, I am going to be filming my long overdue book review for The Mortal Instrument, City of Ashes. It is the second part in a 6-part book series written by Cassandra Clare, and I'm not going to explain to you what it's all about. I'll have a description of the entire series in the description box. But basically, the second book follows around, obviously now Clary knows she's a Shadowhunter and she knows that she and Jace are related. And, it's just the second part of their journey and a lot of new discoveries are made. And I had an amazing time reading this book. There's so many different points that I want to go over. And to prevent this video from being any longer than it has to be, let's just go ahead and get into it. So like I said, first book, a lot of stuff was discovery. Clary finding out who she really is, and also finding out about Luke being a werewolf and Jace being her brother. And so we pretty much got a basic understanding of the shadow world. And what I like about the second book is in this book we went more into detail about that. Now, one of the main things that I was really interested in this book was we got to know a lot more detail about specific members of the shadow world specifically, and downworlders. So we got to know more about the wolf pack and the vampires, and there was some background information about the clave, which was really interesting, and how the circle came to be. And there's a lot of tension between past members of the circle, but we're going to get into all of that. But first, I think it's important to talk about some new characters that was introduced. I'm so excited. So a new character was introduced in this book. Her name is Maya Roberts. She is a werewolf, which is getting to know more about the wolf pack and stuff. So she's a werewolf, and we got to learn about her past and how she ran away from home and her brother was abusive and how he died. She just has a very traumatic past, and I'm excited to find out more about her in the further book series. But anyway, and also we have Inquisitor Herondale. I think that's how you say it. So basically, the Inquisitor is the spokesperson for the clave. She's one of the higher ranking in the clave members, and so she's basically in charge of going around the institution, just in charge of making sure that things go the way they're supposed to go in the shadow world. And Maris and Robert Lightwood, so they're the Lightwood parents, and they weren't introduced in the last book, so we do already know who they are. But I think it's important to include them in this segment of the video, because we did find out a lot more about them and their past with being in the circle, and how they felt about everything, and how it kind of led them to this place where they're at right now. And Lucian was also a member of the circle as well, and so there's a bunch of interactions between them, which I think is super important to mention, but we're going to get to that in a later point, so stay tuned. This book was pretty much divided up into 4 sections, which I think was really interesting. And so I think the main points of the story was to get across the background of the circle and the tensions between the past circle members, and to uncover the the tension between Jace and Clary now that they know that they're related, and how the relationship between Simon and Clary progresses now that he has confessed his feelings for her. And there's some stuff that happens to each of these characters individually, and it affects their relationship overall. And obviously we're going to talk about Magnus and Alec, which is a character in itself, but I'm going to save that to the later part of the video, because that's probably going to take up half the video, because I just have so much to say about Alec. But yeah, so I want to basically go over some of my favorite parts of the book in general, and a few things that I feel need to be talked about. But overall, I love this book, and I love the fact that it's basically, so it's part of a series. And so in this book we did just go more in depth about stuff that we discovered in the first book. So I was happy reading it. There was moments where I was shocked and angry, and there was just one thing after another, and I really, really loved it. So one of my favorite parts of this book was very early on in the stories. There is this confrontation between Luke and Maris. So the background of their history is they were members of the circle together, and after Luke was transformed into a werewolf, he kind of went into hiding, and Maris thought that he was dead. And when he came back during the war on Alicante, there was this small interaction between them, her discovering that he actually was alive, but that's pretty much the last time they seen each other until this very moment of confrontation. So it's basically the confrontation happens because Maris has kicked Jace out of the Institute after discovering that he is Valentine's son. She doesn't really know if she can trust him, which, like, in the beginning, you kind of feel angry at her, but she does have reasons behind thinking that, and you discover more about her feelings on that. But this interaction between Luke and Mary specifically, I really liked it because I feel like you could tell the way the writer wrote it, that there was a lot of anger and built up tension between them, and how they both, in a sense, felt betrayed by one another, because even though they both went along with Valentine, Luke was kind of addressing Maris in the way that he felt like she took it too far by going along with the war, and Maris kind of explained to him that the war wasn't her idea. She didn't really know about it until the last minute, and so yeah, it's just an interaction between them. They're kind of, it's basically like them finally getting to say what they've been holding in for the last 20 years. So I was just like, whoa. Like, I wasn't expecting that part because we don't really go over, like, in the show, there's not a lot of interaction between Maris and Luke. So I thought it was really interesting that they finally had this moment to just go over all their feelings, and you find out more about each of them individually and how they felt about being in the circle and how they're handling their lives. Now you find out more about them individually throughout this confrontation that they have together. So I thought that was wonderful. So Clary and Simon are now a couple. Yay. It's kind of interesting how it happened. So, like, they never really talked about, oh, do you want to be like boyfriend and girlfriend? It kind of just something that, it's kind of something that ends up happening, like, organically. And so it was really fascinating to see how their relationship starts and how they sort of got to that place. But throughout the beginning stages of their relationship, you can kind of tell there's this tension between them about, like, I don't really know how to explain it. There's just like something unsaid going on between them. And so with Clary having her feelings about Jace and how them being related, and Simon going through what he's going through right now, it's kind of like they're in a relationship, but they don't really have a lot of time to discuss what is happening or like really get their heads around while they're together. But, like, towards the end of the story, they do come to a good place about where they stand in their friendship and relationship and stuff. They're in a good place by the end of the story. Like I said, I don't really like to give away too much information in these videos because I do want you guys to read the book, and I don't want to spoil everything for you. But I'm just going to say that they did get together, and whether or not they stayed together is not really my place to say, but I will say this. They end the story on good terms. So from one complicated relationship to another, let's talk about Clary and Jace. So obviously in the last book, they discovered that they are in fact brother and sister, and so naturally that does have a huge impact on their relationship and how things go. But that sort of was the final moment of the last book. So this story, we pretty much got to experience the entirety of how this news has affected them and their feelings for each other and their relationship in general. I can't really say specifically what I would do in this situation or how I feel about how they're acting towards each other, because I feel like it's such a different circumstance to be in. Like, we could all sit here and say, like, oh my goodness, that's your brother, I can't believe you have these feelings for him. But, like, she's known he's been her brother for, like, 5 days. So, the feelings that you have for someone, they don't really go away. I can only imagine the struggle that she must be going through because, like, she had feelings for him, and then she found out he was her brother, and so she's trying to, like, get rid of these feelings, but they don't go away overnight. But at the same time, they kind of feel guilty for having these feelings for each other because they know that it's not right now. Jace, there's a few scenes where, like, they kind of go back and forth about what to do about the situation. Jace does, like, hint at the idea of them going away together to be in a relationship. Like I said, I can't really say how I feel about this situation because I do have a brother, but I've known he's my brother since he's been born. So there's not like any deep-rooted feelings of being in love with each other because we've always known what kind of relationship that we have. And so with Jace and Clary, obviously it's a bit different because they haven't known that they're brothers and sisters. They're siblings for. They haven't known that they're siblings for forever. So it's kind of a different thing for them. I think also coupled with the fact that Clary is trying to figure out how to wake her mother up and discovering that she's a Shadowhunter and her relationship with Simon. There's a lot going on in her life, so I think that does sort of take away from her having to deal with the fact that she is kind of in love with her brother. So it's interesting to see how their relationship folds out in this story, and ultimately Clary and Jace, they kind of ended on this question mark of like, Clary wants to confess to Jace, she wants to express her feelings to Jace about the situation, but he kind of cuts her off and tells her that they should just like be brother and sister and everything like that, which I guess, I don't know, it's just a weird situation to me. But Clary, like, she was kind of trying to say something to him, but we don't know what she was trying to say because he cut her off and she ended up just changing her mind about it. I think she was going to say something along the lines of them having more than just a sibling relationship, but I do like the fact that they kind of left that bit of a cliffhanger for the next story, and how there's still so many different layers to this relationship, and because there are 4 more books left, I'm really interested to see how this entire relationship folds out and how the situation kind of plays itself out. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, but ultimately, I don't know, I just think it's sad how what happened to them, because like, you have feelings for someone and then you find out that there's no way in this world that you can ever be with them, and I just feel a lot of sadness for them, and I'm really hoping that they find a way around this situation. So I think it's funny how, like, at the end of the last book, you kind of expect the love triangle between Jace, Clary, and Simon to come to an end, but it kind of just heats up like it's a love triangle times 1,000, and there's this huge scene in the Sealy Court, which personally, like, the way it was done in the book, to me, does not at all match the way it was described in the story. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it was really cool how the show kind of took its own creativity with certain parts from the book. I think it was interesting that it had a life of its own. But anyway, I love how there's this scene in the Sealy Court where pretty much the Sealy Queen, so the way it works, you can't leave the Sealy Court without permission from the Queen. And so after Clary and Jace and Simon go to interrogate the Queen for her help against the war that Valentine is planning, when they try to leave, she pretty much stops them by saying she wants to play a game. And so the only way for them to leave, the only way to save Simon and Jace's life, because she like put them in this like death trap or something, but the only way to save their life is for Clary to take the kiss that she most desires, to kiss the one that she really wants to be kissing. So she goes to kiss Simon and nothing happens. So automatically when you read this part of the story, you're like, ugh. So it's kind of weird how this plays out. But anyway, she ends up kissing Jace, and like, okay, so this scene played out in the show as well, and when I was watching this show, I was like, yeah! But it's different in the story, because in the show, Clary and Jace, at this point, they discovered that they've discovered some information that makes it okay for them to kiss each other. But in the book, when this scene happens, that information has yet to be revealed, so 2 siblings are making out, and so Simon is obviously devastated, and everyone else who's reading the story is obviously grossed out. But so yeah, it's pretty much just this scene of like the tension between Clary and Jace and Simon, and how it kind of just like goes back and forth. And I feel like it's at this point that the readers are given a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? You're given a sort of inkling to the knowledge that Simon might not be the person that Clary really wants to be with. In a way, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are saying that, but I feel like it's not so black and white. It's not that black and white anymore, because like, so we have to think about the fact that, you know, the mundane world and the shadow world are two completely different places. And so Clary, she met Simon when she was a child, and at that point she was just a normal person. She didn't know she was a part of this world. And so I feel like had they stayed in the mundane world, had she not felt out about this shadow world, Clary and Simon probably would have ended up together. That's just my opinion. You can take it or leave it. But I feel like Simon and Clary had this connection that changed once they became a part of the shadow world. It's just the way I feel about it. Like, I feel like in the mundane world, in normal world, Clary and Simon were absolutely perfect for each other. But being a part of the shadow world, she's not the same person that she was before. And obviously what goes along with that, I'm sorry that I keep fixing my hair, but what goes along with that is obviously like things change and your feelings change, and maybe this is like that Clary and Simon don't really belong together in the shadow world. And so that's what I took the scene in the Sealy Court to be, an inkling to this bit of information, because I feel like it's a big difference between who you, like, you can't run away from destiny. And Simon would have been a part of her destiny had she stayed in mundane, but she didn't. So yeah, that's just my take on it. We'll see how it plays out as the story continues, but I'm interested to see how this entire scenario plays out. So another huge part of this story is Simon's transformation into a vampire, which I personally am still a little bit fuzzy about how that happens. I think like the human drinks from the vampire and then the vampire drinks from the human. I'm pretty sure that's how it happens. Does it have to be in that specific order though? I'm not even sure. Like, there's so many different vampire stories out right now that I'm not really sure. Like, the different ways to get turned into a vampire get mixed up for me. But anyway, so Simon, I'm getting off topic, but Simon pretty much after the kiss between Clary and Jace, Simon leaves the Sealy Court furious about what has happened, and Clary can't get a hold of him for like 24 hours. And so she's at the Institute, and Raphael shows up with Simon's body, pretty much explaining to Clary what has happened to him and how he's going to be turned into a vampire and how she has to make that decision for him. Now, this is something that I feel really interesting, and I try to put myself in that position about how you make that choice. And so I feel like for Clary, she was kind of being kind of selfish, but not in a bad way. It was kind of along the lines of like not wanting him to die, not wanting him to leave his family, and how she kind of feels like it's her fault that he's a vampire in the first place, because, which, I mean, technically it kind of is. Form your own opinion. That's not the point. The point is that Clary, she's been put in charge of making this decision about Simon's life, and she decides to turn him into a vampire, which, like, you can't really, given the circumstances, I feel like you can't really blame her one way or another. Like, regardless of what decision she made, you can't really be mad at her either way. But so pretty much they bury Simon because, like, you have to bury them and then you dig them up and like they're reborn as a vampire. It's kind of really twisted. But after Simon becomes a vampire, there's pretty much, I wish that there would have been more in-depth storylines about how Simon feels about being a vampire. I feel like they kind of took a comedic approach with it, about how he like, oh, I have vampire strength, or I'm nocturnal or anything, and there's this joke about how their relationship is going to progress with him being a vampire. Like, we'll be out at the restaurant and you'll be drinking a virgin Shirley Temple and I'll be drinking the blood of a virgin. So there's jokes along the line of how, like, I guess that's his approach to it, how he, the kind of person that he is, he kind of goes to humor in serious situations. And so that's all cool. Personally, I wish there would have been a little bit more serious, in-depth look about how he felt being a vampire, because we did have that in the show. Like, Simon, he was depressed about being a vampire, so there was a lot of that in the show. Personally, I wish there would have been more of that in the book. I'm excited to see how Simon deals with being a vampire now, and how he does he feel more a part of the group now, or does he feel even less a part of the group, because being a vampire, there are certain limitations to him being not human anymore, or him being like technically dead. So I'm excited to see how that plays out, but I'm also excited to see how Simon and Clary's friendship changes now that they're both technically official members of the Shadow World. So yay! So before I get into this scene in particular, I think it's want to point out that in the beginning of the story, when Simon and Maya did first meet, there was kind of this connection and kind of flirting back and forth about just back and forth about maybe there's feelings there, like what's gonna happen and stuff. But that was before he turned into a vampire, and obviously now that he's a vampire and Maya's a werewolf, we all know how this scene plays out. Like, they hate each other. Vampires and werewolves, they like, no matter what story you read, vampires and werewolves, they don't get along. So there's this really interesting part of the book where after Maya is attacked with Luke and she's returned to his house, there's a confrontation scene between Simon and Maya, how they kind of end up almost fighting each other because, like, their natural instincts are to not like each other. And so in this scene, not only do you get to find out more about, you know, Simon and Maya's issues in particular, but we find out more about the vampire and werewolf history and how they're, like Maya says it herself, they're kind of ingrained not to like each other. So by the end of this story, Simon and Maya do kind of come to this place of truce where she does end up apologizing to him for acting that way. And at the end of the story, Simon confesses to Clary about feeling like Maya understands him in a way that she never could, which I do kind of understand his point. So also really looking forward to see how Simon and Maya's relationship develops in the next part of the story. I thought it was interesting how they like left a whole bunch of these little cliffhangers with these different relationships at the end of the story. So like once the next book comes out, you kind of just like looking forward to see how everything plays out. So I'm looking forward to finding out more about the Simon and Maya relationship, and Maya in particular, and how like the past that she has kind of has affected her in the way that she is, and why she feels that way about Simon, because I feel like it kind of goes more deeply than him just being a vampire. I think there's also this part of her that doesn't want to get hurt because of stuff she's been through in the past. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe you shouldn't even listen to my opinion. Maybe she really is just feeling this way because he's a vampire, but I doubt it. We all know how complicated women are, so. Okay, so let's talk about Malik, which I probably won't even get through this part of the video without smiling because I just love him so much. But so pretty much, obviously in the first book, there was that subtle hint of Magnus flirting with Alec and kind of being like, call me. But that was kind of it. We didn't really see how that situation played out. But for the first half of this book, there's moments kind of like not, I don't know, like there's not really a big explanation. There's just moments of it being like, oh, Magnus and Alec in the corner, like whispering. Magnus and Alec are arguing about something. Magnus and Alec showing up to places together, making it obvious that they had been together. And so halfway through the story, Jace confronts Magnus and Alec about how they're secretly dating and how they haven't told anyone about it. And to which Magnus confronts Alec, and he doesn't say it, but he does hint to the fact that Alec doesn't tell Jace that he's with Magnus because he's still in love with him. And so, like, that entire scene, I was just like, So that scene happened in the same scene where, like, Maya and Simon got into it, and then Magnus and Alec and Jace got into it. So it was just like this entire scene of drama, and I was living for it. On a serious note, you can obviously tell that there is deeper feelings behind Magnus and Alec's relationship and why things are the way that they are. And so, but obviously Alec's feelings for Jace are still there. So I'm so sorry that I keep messing with my hair. It's just like, I have to have my hair down for this video because it's not good. So I'm leaving my hair down, but I can't not mess with it. So I'm so sorry that's distracting. But back to the point. So obviously with Alec still having feelings for Jace, it's kind of like Magnus is kind of resentful towards Alec, but at the same time still really caring about him. And I like how on the scene with there's this, I'm going to get into the battle scene later and what my thoughts on that were, but in specific, there's this scene where Magnus rescues Alec, and there's this moment of clarity between them, and how Alec, like, there's not really a lot of talk about their relationship. You can sort of read between the lines, and there's, for me, there was a lot of, like, you can tell that they really care for each other, and so I'm so excited to see how this relationship plays out. Oh my goodness. I'm the biggest Malik shipper on the planet, but that's not the point. So, yeah, really excited to see the end results of this relationship and how everything works out. And I'm also really excited to find out whether or not Jace discovers Alec's feelings for him, and if so, how's that going to play out? Maybe he already knows subconsciously and he just won't say anything. Imagine if there's a scene where, like, Jace tells Alec, oh, I know you used to have feelings for me, and Alec is just shocked. Oh, cannot wait to read the rest of these books. So as you obviously, like in the beginning, I mentioned that Inquisitor Herondale is a new character in this story, and so I want to talk about her character arc and basically how she plays into all this, because like she ends up having a bigger role than we thought. So in the beginning of the story, obviously when she comes through, she knows that Jace is in fact Valentine's son, and so naturally she doesn't really trust him, and she ends up being like really like cruel to him in a way. She ends up sentencing Jace to prison in the Silent City, and like maybe there's a lot of hate for that. I feel like you have to understand it from a different perspective though, because she is like charged with keeping the entire Shadow World safe, and so with him being the son of the Clave's greatest enemy, you can't just ignore that. And so like you kind of like going back and forth about she's being ridiculous, she's being unfair to him, but at the same time you kind of have to think about the good of everyone in the Shadow World. So it's kind of fuzzy on how to feel about this entire situation, but ultimately I feel like a lot of the reason why she's doing what she's doing to Jace is because of what happened with the Circle. We also find out that during the days of the Circle, Valentine actually murdered her son. And so I think with that information, it does like make her hatred for Valentine and her wanting to get back at him. That also might have something to do with why she's being the way she is towards Jace, in the sense that she, like, Valentine took away her son, so part of her kind of wants to take away his in a way. So it's an interesting part of the story to play with, and I like the fact that they included this information. You can tell, like, she's like a bunch of the characters in the story, they talk about how angry she is and how bitter she is, but I like the fact that we got to understand why and find out why she is the way that she is. So it was an interesting part for me to understand in the story. Now, towards the end of the story, she does end up realizing this tidbit of information about Jace, and we don't, as the readers, we don't understand what that is, because like things happen, and so we never really know what she finds out, but it does have to do with this sort of scar. I think it's the birthmark on his body that she notices, and she kind of says like, that's impossible. So she finds out something that we don't know what it is, except I do, because I saw the show. But when you're reading this book, you don't know what that bit of information is. But the real shocker is that she ends up saving Jace's life by jumping in front of a demon, and she dies by protecting him. So definitely, obviously, it must have something to do with what she found out. I think we'll probably end up discovering that in the next book. Hopefully we don't have to wait too long for that. But yeah, it's sad to see her go in the way that she did, but there is a bit of like happiness in the sense that obviously she came around to Jace if she ended up saving him, and a bit of suspension because you're like, what did she find out? Like, why did she save this guy who just hours ago she was willing to hand over to die? So yeah, it's really crazy and interesting, and yeah, so hopefully we'll be figuring out more about that plotline soon, but I'm so excited because I feel like, as someone who watches the show, like, I know what ends up happening, but I'm excited to see at which point they happen in the storyline. So, if you haven't watched the show, I suggest you go and get the book. I think you should read it. And yeah, so I'm not going to say what happens, but it's going to be good. So let's get into this huge battle that happened at the end of the book. But before we do that, we have to talk about why this entire battle took place. So pretty much Valentine's mission throughout this entire book has been to obtain the Mortal Sword. And the Mortal Sword has the capability to control demons. But what he's trying to do is switch things around to... He basically... Obviously his main goal is to get rid of downworlders in particular, but in order to do that, part of his plan includes he needs the blood of a vampire, the blood of a werewolf, and the blood of a Sealy. Yeah, that is what they're called, sorry. So the war ends up happening because he kidnaps Simon and Maya. And once the Shadowhunters find out about it, obviously, there's this huge war. But I think my favorite part of the war is how Clary ends up saving everyone. So, Clary has the ability to create new runes. Runes that have not been discovered by the Shadowhunters. Runes that no one knows about. Runes that have not been seen before. And Clary, pretty much the only way to stop Valentine, she creates this rune that has the ability to destroy the entire ship. What? There's this huge battle, and Alec gets hurt, and Izzy gets hurt, and Jace gets hurt, and Clary gets kidnapped by Valentine again. And so there's so much happens during this scene. Like, I don't even know if I can get to it all, but Clary and Valentine have this confrontation, and he pretty much tells her how he knows she's in love with Jace, and there's a back and forth about that. And there's the scene with Magnus and Alec, and they end up talking, and Jace, he feeds Simon his blood, which is a completely new thing for them, because, like, they don't have the type of relationship where you think he would help him in that situation. But obviously he did it for Clary because he doesn't want Clary to lose Simon. So now that Simon is a daylighter after drinking Jace's blood, which we don't know why that is or how one's related to the other, but I think we're going to find out more about that as well. But I'm excited to see how Simon being a daylighter, how things change for him, and how he'll use that to his advantage, because at the end of the story we did see this moment between Simon and Clary, how, like, things were discussed. I don't want to reveal too much, but I think it has a lot to do with Simon sort of wanting to figure out more about who he is, and being a vampire has changed things for him, and so he wants to take that into perspective and sort of change his life in a way. I don't really know. There's a lot of cryptic stuff being said and throughout this book, which isn't frustrating at all. But it's kind of, overall, I'm really interested to see Simon's journey throughout this book, because I feel like we're already seeing hints of him transforming from this nerdy guy, Clary's best friend, to how he'll change throughout this book series. So I'm excited to see the rest of that. And that concludes this book review. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. I hope I really got through. I tried to talk about all of my favorite points throughout the book. I did some writing down, and I did some research, and I really thought about it. So I hope that I did a good job of remembering what was important to me and, like, my favorite parts of the book. But in case I didn't, I'll probably tweet about them later, so you can go ahead and follow my Twitter right here, because there's a bunch of, you can't click that, but that's my Twitter name. So yeah. So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter to hear more about the books. And I also have been known to include, like, little hints of my favorite parts of books as I'm reading them in my Instagram story. So that's my Instagram right there. So go follow me on Instagram. So you have Twitter and Instagram. So there's no reason you shouldn't be following me. And it'll also be in the description box as well. And also in the description box, I'll be including sort of like a summary of the book all of the book series and what they're all about together, because I didn't want to waste too much time in this video talking about them, because I figure I'm reviewing 6 books, and it takes up a lot of time to keep reviewing what the book series are about. So yeah, that'll be in the description as well, along with all my social media. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching this video. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you push that notification bell, you'll be notified every time I post a video. Thank you so much for all your love and support. It means the world to me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! One last time, really sorry about the fact that I spent the majority of this video messing with my hair, but it keeps falling in my face, see? I can't deal with it. Anyway, I'm gonna go do something about this. See you guys.